Number 10 is Dark Lords. So this archetype is interesting because it has a variety of large monsters and different spell and trap effects that they can use, but what makes it cool is that the monsters themselves are actually able to use the spell and trap card effects from the graveyard. So most of the newer Dark Lord support monsters can have you pay 1,000 life points and then select one of your spell and traps in the graveyard. It gets shuffled back into your deck and then you apply the effect of that spell or trap card. So what's really cool about this is that it actually lets you circumvent costs that are associated with activating these cards. So if there's ever like a tribute this monster or whatever, something like that, then you don't actually have to do it. And it also lets you apply the effects of spell and trap cards multiple times within the same turn. Number 9 are Gladiator Beasts, a personal favorite of mine. So they have a couple of really cool mechanics that make them unique. The first being that they, when they attack successfully and survive, at the end of the battle phase can shuffle themselves back into the deck and bring out another Gladiator Beast. And then the new Gladiator Beast that was summoned by the effect of any of the others will have a completely, unique effect to it. Early on, this was just stuff like Gladiator Beast Laquari getting an attack boost, or Bestiari pops a spell or trap, Murmillo pops a monster, but this deck just got a lot of new support, and some of the new Gladiator Beasts are actually pretty useful too. They can send things from the deck to the grave, change their names, that kind of stuff, and then also Gladiator Beasts have the ability to contact fuse, which is a lot of fun because it actually lets you do fusion summons by just returning the monsters to your deck, and you summon the monster out from your extra deck. There's no need for polymerization. You can even do it with monsters that are face down. You just reveal them to your opponent. And yeah, it's a pretty cool deck. So number 8 is Subterras. Subterras being the flip effect archetype. Now, we've had flip effect archetypes in the past. We've had Chadals, we've had Prediction Princesses, and there are others like Crawlers. But I think that Subterras are actually probably the most unique ones just because of the way that they get summoned and the fact that they are able to flip themselves back face down. So if a monster on your side of the field gets flipped down, then you can summon your Subterra monster from your hand and then flip it down, and then of course they all have really powerful flip effects. I liked the concept of this archetype so much because the way that it works is kind of like, you've got these Subterras, or these giant scary monsters, but they live underground, and so underground in this sense is being set face down on the field. When they're flipped face up, they're these horrible, terrible monsters that are really powerful and I guess destroy the earth and stuff. And you get a lot of really strong ones. You have things like Stalagmo, things like Eumastrix, and there are others that aren't commonly used. If you ask me, the biggest sort of disappointment of the Subterra archetype is that it's kind of just been relegated to guru control. Number 7 is Kaijus. So we all know Kaijus as, like an out to an annoying monster your opponent has, attributed for a Gameciel, but the Kaiju archetype itself actually functions in a really unique way. So you are supposed to be tributing your opponent's monsters, but by summoning a Kaiju to your opponent's side of the field, you're also able to summon a Kaiju to your side of the field, and Kaijus always have to do battle with other Kaijus, which is cool because this theme is supposed to kind of be like these Godzilla-like monsters that are fighting, and they're big and they're huge, and you've got like things like Kyoto Waterfront, you've got Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, but you also have things like the Kaiju Files, which is something that not a lot of people commonly use, and all of these cards focus on putting Kaiju counters on the field, and then the different Kaiju monsters utilize those Kaiju counters in different ways to do things. Gameciel again being probably the most notorious one because it can just straight up negate things, but the others have effects too, and it's a fun archetype. It definitely is not commonly played on its own, and it bricks a lot, but it is unique. Number 6 is Artifacts. So Artifacts are neat because they actually can be set in the back row as spell and trap cards, even though they're monsters. And while they're back here like this, they can activate when they're destroyed by an opponent's card effect or even by your own. So if your opponent goes and tries to activate MST or Twin Twisters or Heavy Storm Duster and destroy these artifact monsters, they'll actually be able to summon themselves out and then get additional effects. And of course, you guys kind of know the most popular ones. There's things like Artifact Scythe, which just straight up locks the opponent out of summoning from the extra deck. And then there's also things like Artifact Morale Tech, and they even have an Xyz monster that can change your opponent's spell and trap effects into effects that would destroy your spell and trap cards. And you can run some pretty creative, fun stuff in here. Things like Double Cyclone, things like Twin Twisters, and of course, they have their own set of artifact cards. They've got Artifact Ignition and then Artifact Sanctum. So I think that this is cool. It's neat to see an archetype that's just entirely about setting itself in the back row and getting destroyed. So if you've made it this far in the video and you appreciate my new, faster, to the point style of presenting these things, give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments that you like it. So deck number 5 is Paleozoics. Now this is a unique one because these are basically trap cards that have regular old effects, but what makes them cool is that they actually can, in the graveyard, activate after you've used a regular trap. So if you use any other trap card, even something like Solemn Strike, you can activate your Paleozoic monsters in the grave and summon themselves out to the field as monsters. When they're summoned this way, they actually are unaffected by monster effects, something that doesn't come up too often but can be relevant. And what's cool about that is that because they're monsters, you can use them for link summoning, typically to make something like Mistar Boy or their own set of different Xyz monsters, or probably most notoriously, Totally Awesome. So this is a really cool take on the whole trap monster thing, and it means that you can run a deck filled with trap cards if you're the type of person who likes to do that at least. And then these will function as your monsters, and they do give you a sort of recurring engine of support and sort of like the ability to make boss monsters and things like that. 4 is Element Sabers. So Element Sabers have the really unique quality of being able to change their attributes while in their graveyard. So this means that you can summon the Elemental Lords, which is the companion archetype for these guys, very easily. Once you get a certain amount of Element Sabers in the graveyard, you just change them all to water, and now you can summon Moulin Glacia. Change them all to earth, you can summon Grand Soil. But I think what makes this so cool is that you can actually use this attribute changing effect to use a bunch of boss monsters you wouldn't expect to normally be able to use. So they can summon Dark Armed Dragon very easily by just changing till you have 3 dark monsters in your grave. Exactly 3, Dark Armed Dragon's there, and it's a 2 now. You can also make 1 light and 1 dark and easily summon BLS, or Chaos Dragon Legionnaire. He's a really powerful thing. Why not make them all 3 dark so that when you banish to summon it, you'll get to discard a card from your opponent's hand, for instance. If you wanted to be really cheeky, you could even use something like Dark Samor or Desert Twister or anything like that. Deck 3, the Weather Painters. So this is one that kind of goes under the radar, not a lot of people talk about it, but I think it's very unique because the monsters actually gain effects from the spell and trap cards. So you've got continuous spells and traps that affect the monsters that are directly in front of them and then to both sides. So it kind of makes a T-zone. And when you have these continuous spells and traps out, they let these Weather Painters basically banish themselves from the field to activate different disruptive style effects. It could be a search, it could be a bounce, that type of thing. And then the Weather Painters themselves, when they've been banished, come back in the next standby phase. And that's great. It means that you are going to recur your losses because you are technically losing something when you banish the cards. But it's neat because basically the monsters alone aren't great, but when they have their spells and traps, they become really strong, and you can have multiple spells and traps out. So one Weather Painter monster at a given time can actually have as many as 3 different effects that it can use. So I think this is a really unique style of play that we just kind of haven't really seen. It utilizes columns and zones in a really cool way, and that's why I like it so much. Number 2 is Magical Musketeers. So Magical Musketeers actually got hyped up to be something really big, but that's not really what we're going to be talking about here. The thing with this archetype is that A, it lets you use its themed spell and trap cards from your hand, even in your opponent's turn. So you can use quick plays, traps, even a counter trap from your hand just while your opponent's playing. And if any spell or trap card gets used in the same column as a magical musket monster, then that monster gets an effect. So most notoriously, we've got things like Starfire and Caspar that will get searches or summons from the deck. Dot can recycle spell and trap cards. And that is very cool because it means that your opponent can be punished for playing cards in the wrong column. If they just, activate their Rhoda or their Foolish Barrel or something and kind of don't think about it and it's in the same column as your magical musket monster, then you might get a free search or a free summon. And that's crazy. It also means that you have to think a little bit about where you play your own spell and trap cards. They do, of course, have hard ones per turn, so once you've played a spell or trap in a column that a musket's in, you want to play your next spell or trap card in a different column that a different musket's in. And coming in at number 1, we've got Mech Knights, which are extremely unique for the very big reason of just making zones and columns truly matter. Yes, Weather Painters did some really cool things and Magical Muskets did some really cool things, but Mech Knights far and away have actually transformed the way that people think about the game. So if there are 2 or more cards in the same column, then you can summon a Mech Knight from your hand to that column. That means that if your opponent has like a set spell or trap card, then you could set one of your own spell or trap cards, then summon a Mech Knight right there. Now the thing with that though is you're actually rewarded if more of these cards are your opponent's. So for example with Blue Sky, if your opponent has 2 cards in a column or even 3 because it's where an extra monster zone is, then summoning Blue Sky will get you searches proportionate to the amount of cards your opponent had. So that means you could get as many as 3 Mech Knight searches from your deck. In addition to that, they've got spell and trap cards like World Legacy Key, for instance, or World Legacy Whispers, where basically it can negate monster effects, spells, or traps that are in the same column as a Mech Knight. And you even got Mech Knight Indigo Eclipse that can actually change where it or another Mech Knight monster is. So if your opponent activates, this spell card in what they think is a free column, you can use Indigo Eclipse and move over there so that there's a Mech Knight in that same column, and now suddenly their Terraforming or their Rhoda or their Foolish Burial gets negated. And it doesn't stop there, because they even have a link monster, Morningstar, that prevents Mech Knight monsters from being destroyed by battle with a monster that's in the same column as them. So this makes your opponent extremely wary, and you can actually see the effects of this in modern day play today. There was a time in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you just kind of like activated stuff wherever, set stuff wherever, but with Mech Knights around, you'll actually see people who will set their spell and trap cards to zones that don't have monsters in them because they don't want to give their opponent the potential ability to get a free summon of a blue sky and get a lot of extra searches. So I think that by and large, Mech Knights are the most unique archetype in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, and they get #1 on this list. So those are, in my opinion, the 10 most interesting, unique archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of playstyle, but obviously there's a lot that I could have missed, so let me know down in the comments which ones you'd like to see on this list that you think are just very different and play in a very unique way. And of course, I'll read them, it'll be fun. Be sure to thumbs up if you like the video, subs if you love the video, and look carefully, and you might even see that I hid an Inked Gaming discount code somewhere in this video, so check that out. All right, that's gonna be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.